at the heart of the Roman Empire. Every detail of a soldier's gear carried both function and symbolism. And among all the items worn by a legionary, there was one that held special importance, the belt. But this belt wasn't called that by the Romans. Its true name was Balteus, and its origin dates back to the early days of Rome's professional army. The Balteus emerged not merely as a clothing accessory, but as a piece designed to connect the soldier physically and symbolically to his armor and his role within the legion. More than just holding up the tunic or supporting the sword, the Balteus represented the first tangible bond between the man and the Roman ideal of discipline, order, and glory. Made from thick leather, reinforced straps, and often adorned with metal, silver, bronze, or iron, it quickly became recognized as the trademark of a true Roman warrior. Through it, the soldier carried his gladius, the primary close combat weapon, and it marked his status as an active combatant. But more interesting than its origin or utility was how the Balteus evolved into a symbol. Rome, a master of crafting myths and traditions to secure its power, turned this belt into something far greater than a piece of military equipment. It became an icon of honor, a kind of insignia that separated the common citizen from the soldier sworn to serve the empire. Amid the heat of battle, under the weight of armor and the constant tension of war, the Balteus became a vital extension of the legionary's body. Its practical function within the Roman military uniform went far beyond appearance. It was, quite literally, what kept the warrior armed and ready. Fastened at the waist, the belt supported the gladius, the short sword used in close combat, positioning it on the right or left side, depending on the legion and the combat strategy adopted. This ensured that the soldier could draw his weapon quickly and instinctively, even in the chaos of the battlefield. Additionally, the front part of the Balteus unfolded into thick leather straps that descended over the upper thighs, forming a kind of protective apron. These straps, adorned with metal plates, offered defense for the most vulnerable areas of the body, especially in hand-to-hand fighting, where swords and spears aimed precisely at weak spots. In a way, it was a mobile, lightweight armor, practical and efficient. The Balteus also played a role in organizing the load carried by the legionary. As part of a highly disciplined army in constant movement, body balance was essential. The belt, when properly adjusted, helped distribute the weight of the armor, shield, and weapons more evenly, preventing imbalance that could prove fatal in combat. Even during rest or while marching, the Balteus allowed the soldier to carry small tools, pouches, coins, or personal amulets. In the Roman army, nothing was improvised. Everything had a purpose, and the Balteus, with its quiet engineering, was one of the most efficient elements of the entire military gear. It was what made the warrior truly ready to attack, to defend, and to endure. Yet this functional piece was only half the story, because what it represented in the Roman imagination was far deeper. But the true power of the Balteus wasn't just in its practical use. It lay in what it represented to the soldier and to Rome itself. In an empire where symbols were carefully crafted to shape minds and control the masses, the military belt became much more than an accessory. It was a living symbol of belonging, honor, and status. For legionaries, wearing the Balteus was like wearing a second skin, not only in the physical sense, but also in a spiritual one. It was the visible emblem of a silent pact with the legion, the emperor, and the gods who protected Rome. Every inch of worn leather, every metal plate, every mark on the surface told a story of grueling marches, hard-won battles, and fallen brothers. Over time, the belt became a kind of war diary, a sacred artifact that couldn't be separated from its bearer without emotional consequences. Visually, the Balteus was striking. The metallic adornments reflected the sunlight like miniature suits of armor. It made the soldier stand out. It said without words that this man was trained, sworn, and part of a war machine that had conquered half the known world. It was, therefore, also an intimidating piece. A civilian looking at a legionary knew that man carried Rome around his waist. The symbolism was so powerful that even among fellow soldiers, losing the Balteus in battle or being forced to remove it for any reason was a deep source of shame. because without the Balteus, the man was just a body. With it, he was a Roman warrior. The symbolic weight of the Balteus was so immense that its removal was never just a simple act. It was an act of moral annihilation. When a Roman soldier committed a serious offense, insubordination, or cowardice, he didn't always need to be whipped in a public square to feel the sting of disgrace. Often, all it took was the order to remove his belt. That gesture alone became a ritual of silent humiliation, understood by everyone around. Removing the Balteus meant, in practice, the immediate suspension of a man's status as a legionary. The soldier who took it off in public was no longer a combatant. He was a traitor, a dishonored man, someone cast out from the brotherhood of the army. In an age where honor meant more than life itself, this kind of punishment cut deeper than any sword. Soldiers stripped of their belt sometimes preferred suicide over the shame of continuing to live without their symbol of honor. More than just a disciplinary measure, it was a social and spiritual death sentence. Other soldiers would avoid the disgraced man, refusing to meet his gaze. He would lose the right to march, to sleep alongside his comrades, to participate in collective rituals, like communal baths, offerings to the gods, and even mealtimes. It was as if he were dead to Rome, even while still breathing. And this wasn't limited to wartime. Even during peace, a simple internal judgment within the legion could deliver the dreaded verdict: remove your belt. Along with it, the soldier would lose his pay, his protection, his glory, and his place in the world. It was a clean, symbolic, and devastating punishment, and Rome knew exactly how to use symbols to control its men. It was precisely this devastating symbolic power of the Balteus that turned an incident in the year 69 AD into one of the most striking episodes involving soldiers and civilians within Rome itself. That year, known as the Year of the Four Emperors, was a time of extreme political instability, with generals and military factions competing for control of the throne. Amid this chaos, Emperor Vitellius, supported by legions from the north, particularly from the Rhine region, brought his troops to the capital. But instead of a triumphant welcome, he encountered something far more hostile. As these foreign legionaries marched through the streets of the city, many Roman civilians, especially from the urban elite, made no effort to hide their disdain. They saw the northern soldiers as brutes, uncultured and unworthy of Roman grandeur. The resentment, fueled by regional prejudice and political turmoil, reached a boiling point. And then, in the dense crowds, some civilians began to do the unthinkable. They started cutting the soldiers' belts. At first glance, it may have seemed like a childish or petty act. But to the legionaries, it was a direct attack on their honor, an insult that didn't just tear leather, but shredded their very identity. It was as if they were being publicly stripped of their dignity and expelled from the legion in front of the whole city. The response was swift and brutal. Once the soldiers realized what was happening, they reacted with violence, killing the civilians responsible right there in the streets of Rome, without trial, without mercy. What began as symbolic mockery exploded into real bloodshed. Rather than strengthening Vitellius' rule, this event further damaged his reputation, revealing that he had no control over either the people's hostility or his own army's fury. What this moment made painfully clear was that the Balteus was far more than a belt. It was an invisible boundary between respect and chaos, pride and collapse. A strip of leather and metal that, when violated, unleashed the fury of an entire empire. Although the Roman Empire fell over 1,000 years ago, the legacy of the Balteus did not vanish with the ashes of Rome. In fact, it survived in subtle and symbolic ways, crossing centuries, cultures, and languages to reach our modern lives. The belt that once symbolized the honor of a legionary lives on, not just as an accessory, but as an idea. A symbol of authority, identity, and belonging that still echoes today in military uniforms, police attire, ceremonial garments, and even in the language we speak. The English word belt, for instance, traces its roots back to the Latin word Balteus. The term endured not just as vocabulary, but as a concept, the notion that what wraps around the waist can carry more than tools, it can carry deep meaning. That's why even today, in modern military and formal contexts, the belt remains a central part of the uniform, marking not just the body, but the role and purpose of the one who wears it. Moreover, the act of removing the belt or being stripped of uniform still carries powerful symbolic weight. Police officers suspended, soldiers disciplined, even martial artists losing their rank. All these modern rituals unconsciously reflect that same Roman gesture of removing the Balteus as a form of public disgrace. At its core, the Balteus became a silent archetype, the idea that material symbols can carry immaterial identities. A simple belt, when loaded with history, can become the bridge between past and present, between a fallen empire and the social structures that still govern our relationship with honor, duty, and authority. And that's why, even if Rome no longer exists on the map, it still fastens the belt around our collective memory. If this deep dive into one of the Roman army's most silent, yet powerful, symbols surprised you, imagine what else Rome is still hiding. History is full of buried details that completely change the way we see the past, and even ourselves. If you're fascinated by the hidden side of great civilizations, forgotten rituals, and the symbols that shape the world, this channel was made for you. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell, because every week I bring you stories like this, rich in detail, visually striking, and always with a twist you won't find in textbooks. And if this video sparked your curiosity, leave a like. It shows me that you value true historical content and helps me keep uncovering stories Rome would rather you didn't know. And tell me in the comments, what other Roman symbol or tradition have you always wanted to understand? Your question might become the next video on this channel, because here, every detail reveals an entire empire.